I'm Claire, the Associate Curator at the Allentown Art Museum, and today I'm excited to share with you some Japanese textiles as well as some works that were inspired by Japanese art and design. These works are part of our ongoing textile exhibition titled Collecting Across Cultures, Japanese Textiles in the West, that looks at the history of American and European collectors purchasing Japanese textiles, often for use as home decor. This exhibition shares a really complex story. On one hand, you have American and European collectors who are really interested in and excited about Japanese art. Japan has just come out of a period of limited contact with other nations due to US military aggression that forced them into trade with Western nations. And so when Japanese goods are coming onto the market, they're very exciting and new. Japanese art and design just looks very different from conventional Western design. It's very inspiring to artists, and it's something that comes to the attention of wealthy collectors and becomes fashionable for home decor. In Japan, on the other hand, this period of transition is causing a lot of political and social changes and also influences the making of traditional textiles and other arts, as we'll see. I wanted to start out by looking at this pair of hakama. Hakama are traditional pants worn in Japan, and this particular pair was probably made as part of a theatrical costume in the mid-1800s. It has this really fantastic embroidered decoration, and you can see it has the types of flowers, which are identifiable as flowers, but not totally realistic. Some of the detail has been taken away, the design has been simplified, and so you get this more stylized or pattern-like version of the flowers. And similarly, you have these curling vines that make these perfect spirals. And so you have a stylization of the vine into this sort of geometric motif. These features of stylization and attention to natural motifs are both key features of Japanese design and something that really impressed Western collectors of Japanese art. This particular pair of hakama were collected by Charles Sumner Graham, who was a Pennsylvania industrialist. He was able to retire in his 20s and collected this on his travels. He likely purchased it from a dealer in Japan, and collectors like Graham were really interested in these kinds of embroidered textiles with the really brilliant metallic thread, a very flashy look. And they often used them as home decor. In contrast to the more elite hakama that we just looked at with that elaborate metallic embroidery, in this case we have an example of some more affordable textiles. These two textiles are cotton with shibori, which is essentially a form of tie-dyeing made using stitching to create the patterns. And you can see that it has this repeated leaf motif. And again, we see that stylization of the design, the simplification, and the asymmetry as well. Japanese textiles often repeat the pattern flipped on the diagonal. That's because traditionally, with a kimono, the fabric runs up the front of the body, over the shoulder, and down the back with no shoulder seams. So it's the same length of fabric, and the design has to work both right side up and upside down. And so it creates a really different rhythm and sense of space than you see in Western textiles and design. These textiles are from the 1915 Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco. They were part of Japan's section of the exhibition, where Japanese artisans and merchants sold a variety of textiles. And these dyed cotton textiles would be affordable for the average middle class, upper middle class person, maybe a woman looking to collect an interesting textile to use to decorate her home. Japanese objects were seen as really elegant and fashionable in this era. With these textiles, we see a transition where you have Japanese makers and artisans who are making art specifically to sell to a Western audience and taking advantage of that new market that's been opened up as a result of the changing political and economic situation in the late 1800s. We have another example here of a Japanese good made specifically for export for a Western audience. This cloisonné desk set with its really delicate decoration was made by creating the design with wire and then melting enamel in the spaces in between the wire to create these really vivid natural motifs. And so I wanted to finish up by taking a look at this Whiting and Davis coffee service. This is an example of American art that was inspired by the new interest in Japanese art and design. The coffee service dates from the 1880s, and it features these cherry branches on the front. And you can see, again, there's this interest in nature, really organic nature, and also in allowing for asymmetrical compositions. You'll also notice something interesting as we're looking here, that each piece of the service has some bugs crawling on it. And this is something you see particularly in design from the 1870s and 1880s. It has these little bugs not only on the front, but also on the back of the service. Each piece in the service has this fun surprise with our insect life. It was really fashionable to, include some more unusual and not often highlighted parts of nature, like insects, on home decor. Thanks so much for joining me to take a closer look at some of our Japanese and Japanese-inspired decorative arts objects from the collection today. I hope you have a chance to come down and see these textiles and amazing design objects in person.